This year, about 60,000 migrant children are expected to make the dangerous trek and cross into the United States from Central America and Mexico alone. Most are seeking an escape from gruesome conditions in their home countries. But when they arrive, life doesn't get much better for them. Meade, new director of the University of San Diego's Trans-Border Institute, is here to talk about the problem. Tell me, how desperate are the lives of these children in their native countries that they're willing to make this very dangerous journey into the United States alone?
Well, there's a dramatic range. I would say, in some cases, these are kids whose parents have been killed or disappeared in drug violence. In other cases, and many of the cases from Honduras and El Salvador in particular, these are kids who are forcibly recruited into gangs, girls who are forced to be the quote-unquote girlfriend of a gang member, people who've been threatened with rape and murder, people who've been targeted by the police forces for an association with a gang in one of these countries, whether it's a real association or not. Some of these kids also are fearing violence in their own homes. You know, there's a good probably 1 in 5, according to one recent study, who their parents or the people who are taking care of them, have beaten them or abused them or abandoned them in different ways. So it's a full range of cases.
And when they make that journey, how treacherous is it?
It's incredibly treacherous, and I think this is probably, the president referred yesterday to a humanitarian crisis, talking about the number of kids as they arrive on the border. But the actual transit itself, this journey that kids make, that's the real humanitarian crisis, or it's at least as bad as the conditions they're fleeing. So kids are coming up through Mexico, and most of them do make the journey through Mexico. You may be familiar with the story of La Bestia, or the beast, the train that many kids ride on top of. Thousands of kids have fallen off of the train and lost limbs or been killed. Migrant girls, when they cross. There's a good study by Amnesty International that shows that 6 in 10 women and girls are raped in transit. Girls tell us anecdotally, I hear from lots of their lawyers across the country, that they're advised in shelters and by other adults to take birth control before they cross the border as a precaution against a rape that's basically inevitable.
And how young are some of these girls?
So this is something that's really changed. If you look at the age profile of the kids who are coming, a couple of years ago, it was a small percentage that were under 14. Now it's about a quarter of the kids who are coming are under 14 years old. So there's many young children. I talked to a Border Patrol agent just a couple of weeks ago who told me about detaining an 8-year-old child. These are kids that I think we all agree. And his response to me was, I have an 8-year-old daughter. This isn't someone that I think should be locked up or that I think I should have a jurisdiction over. We've got to find a better way to handle this problem. And that was coming from someone in the Border Patrol.
Given what you've described, what condition do they arrive in?
It's a variety, and that depends. Some of them, if they end up kidnapped and taken by traffickers, and by one estimate, something like 20,000 Central American migrants a year are kidnapped and extorted. We can't separate the kids out of that number, but many kids are. So they can be in pretty desperate straits. Other kids make the journey, and thanks to the good work of shelters in Mexico, like the Casa del Guay in Tijuana or the Casa de la Madre Asunta in Tijuana, who do just amazing work. They may not be in great shape when they get to northern Mexico, but thanks to those organizations, they're in better shape when they cross the border.
So when they cross the border, what percentage of them get caught, and what happens when they enter the immigration system?
Okay, so in terms of the percentage that get caught, we don't really know. I will tell you that with the Central American kids, many of them more or less surrender themselves or are apprehended right at the border. The Mexican kids, it might be a little bit more complicated than that. So what happens to them is they're taken by the border enforcers themselves. Usually, if it's at a port of entry, it would be Customs and Border Patrol, or Customs and Border Protection, excuse me. If it's not at a port of entry, it would be the Border Patrol. They then hand them over under the law to the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which has formal custody over the kids. They have a detention center in San Diego. It's very small, though. It can only handle about 25 kids at a time. They then try to place the kids with sponsors. Usually those are relatives, not always close relatives, but relatives. And those relatives may be anywhere in the United States. Most of these kids come through San Diego pretty quickly, or they put them with shelters who've been approved to hold them. That's where it gets really complicated, and that's where we tend to kind of lose track of the kids, because what happens is the government also initiates removal proceedings or deportation proceedings against the kids. But the kids move around so much, and the sponsors move around, and they end up dispersed throughout the country. The kids almost, lots of the kids, I should say, never learn about their legal proceedings. They miss a notice to appear in front of a judge, or they get a notice to appear and they're in the Central Valley working in the field somewhere, and they're supposed to be in San Francisco in a week for proceedings. So they miss their proceedings. They're often then declared removed or deportable under immigration law in absentia. And they never learn about this. And these kids sort of go through their lives here in the United States, and then they try to get married. They try to sign up for school, or they have a traffic violation or something that kind of flags them to law enforcement, and they end up realizing at that point that they were ordered deported years ago, and they're ineligible for any kind of relief under immigration law and face deportation.
Very quickly, is there any kind of special immigration status that these kids qualify for?
Yeah, about half the kids probably qualify for some kind of protection. So for some kids, if they've been persecuted, it would be asylum. If they've been abused, neglected, or abandoned, it would be a special immigrant juvenile visa. If they've been trafficked, there's a special visa for that. If they've been victims of crime and they're willing to testify against the criminals, there's a special visa for that. All of these things, though, require lots of collaboration from law enforcement.
And we're going to have to wrap it there. Meade, thanks so much for coming on the program.